Guys, this is part 4 of the asset bookmarks tutorial. We're continuing to add more stuff to the UI. We have added the text field where we're going to add our name for the bookmark. And now we're going to say if GUI layout that button, we'll name the button added and we'll say GUI layout that width of 50 pixels. We're going to call add objects, and since we don't have that method, we're going to add it here right above the remove objects, and this method is going to add the object that is selected, but we're going to check later on. Now, after we call add objects, we're closing that, we're ending the horizontal, we're making GUI layout that space of 10 pixels. Let's see how's that going to look. Cool. Okay. And then the repaint, and then we are already with the GUI function. Now let's go in the highlight objects. Highlight objects is going to use something that's in the editor GUI utility class, which Unity is using to highlight an object. So we're going to say editor GUI utility ping object, and we're going to say bookmark object and use the asset index for that. And that's it. This is how you're going to ping an object. Add remove objects. Here I'm going to say a region add remove objects. Okay. Here I'll say end region. In the add objects, we will say if selection that active object. If there is active object, selection is a class that is checking if something is selected inside the editor. If we are selecting object and asset database that contains selection that active objects. Asset database means if the objects that we're selecting is asset. That's pretty much because the selection is also returning objects from the scene. We don't want to add objects from the scene. We want to add only objects from the project folder. We can add object from the scene, but we're not going to do that because if we change scenes, that means you will get an error. So we'll leave that for now. We'll open the braces and we'll say if bookmark objects that contains selection that active object. So we pretty much, after we check if we're selecting object and if that object is an asset, we're going to check if that object is in the bookmark object list. If it is, we're going to say debug.log. Actually, we're going to say debug.log warning. We're going to say 3 stars. Object is already in the list. What this does is we're going to say return, so it exits. What this does is pretty much saying that if we have an object here, and if we select the same object and we try to add it, it will give us a warning because we don't want to add the same object twice. That's why we're making this. Check if the selected object is already added in the bookmark list. Okay. Turn. Actually, not here. We're going to do that here, because here is where we check the object. Here we check only if that object is active and if it's from the assets. Here we check if the object is in the list. If it's not in the list and we don't return, if new fav name is equal to empty, check if the name field is empty. All of these here are checkings for errors. Debug that log warning. We're going to type 3 stars. Please add name for the highlighted object. Return. This is pretty much if you select an object and you don't add a name. You want to add a name and then add that object. So if you don't add a name, we can't add it to the list. So this is what we check. If we have a selection, if that selection is not already in the list, and if we have added a name in the field, then we can continue to bookmark objects that added the, and we'll say selection that active object. So we add the object to the list with bookmarks, and then we say bookmark names that added the new favorite object name. We're going to get the name of the object, not the name of the object, but the name that we're typing here in the field. Oops, sorry. So it's whatever name here. Now you can do something like this. You can do, if you want, bookmark names that added the bookmark objects, not bookmark object, but selection that active object that name. This way you don't need to write the name, but you can just use the name that's here. If you don't want to write names, this is how you can do it. I'd like to name the stuff the way I want, so I'm adding a name. And then we're going to type new fav name is equal to this. This way, every time we add an object, it will clean the field, so we don't add the object with the same name like the previous one. If selection that active game object, we're going to type else. So if there is no active object selected, or if the object is not an asset, we can say debug log warning, 3 stars, please select an asset, return, and after we close we say save database, save the database. Okay, load database, void save database. Okay, now everything like this is working. Now I can remove these lines of code for debugging. Let me just do it like this, and I will go to Unity so I can clear the lists. Okay, the list is cleared, and I will remove this as well. Okay, let me just check if it's working. Yeah, okay, you can see now that it's working, but if I close it and I open it, there's nothing here. Why is that? Because this list is not serialized, it's a private list. Now if you make it public list, you can see something. If I close and if I open again and I add something, let me close, open, it's not here as well. Well, I was expecting something else. Anyway, you can't do that. You have to serialize it, which is slightly more advanced. But for now, I don't need to serialize it, because even if I serialize it, it will not stay, it will not remain if I close and open Unity. Because if I serialize it, it will be relative to a certain scene. I don't want it to be relative to a scene, I want it to be relative to the whole project. This is why I'm going to actually save it to external file. Now, first of all, we're going to come here to remove objects, and we'll say we'll first fill that. So if we want to remove an object, we should be able to remove it. And then we're going to deal with the load and save the databases. So let's come to remove objects and say bookmark objects that remove at asset index. It's as easy as that. Bookmark names that remove at asset index, and we're going to say save database, because every time we remove or add object, we want to save the database, so everything is correct. We are removing the object that is at a certain index, and the name at a certain index. This way we're cleaning. Now if we come here, if I open the asset and I say like this and then this, I can remove them. You can see that everything is absolutely cool. So that's it for this part. In the next video we'll add the load and save database, and that will be it for the whole script. Thanks for watching.